rescue, a regular rescue, but they carry the additional tractor trailer that is a collapse unit, which has all the shoring that they would need, jacks that they would need, and all the equipment that they need for a, collapse situation.
Talk us a little bit through the equipment. Talk us through about that specific equipment that you're mentioning there. What kind of equipment is it?
Well, it's a lot of shoring and jacks to support the areas that might further collapse.
Right.
And they would have also listening equipment to see if there's any kind of noise. If somebody could be in that pile if they were in those rooms that did collapse.
Right. Jim, when we had the last major collapse in New York City, that garage that collapsed in Lower Manhattan, right around Broadway and Liberty Streets, that killed one person. We saw that the FDNY for the first time used that robotic dog to go in and search the collapsed garage. Do you think that we will see that technology being used here as well as drones? We know that the mayor is a huge fan of those things.
Yes, but it'll be mostly it would be in the collapsed pile, because pretty much the apartments are wide open. The tower ladder did a good look. And also with the fire escape, they could get to the other ends of those apartments. So if there's anybody that's going to be trapped, it's going to be in the big rubble that's at the corner of the building.
Talk also about securing the area. I mean, I just looked at the MTA, and the first report is that the BX40 and the BX42 buses are delayed, probably being redirected due to the activity at the scene there. And I'm only imagining that you're probably going to want a wide area to secure in case some of that building comes down. How do you decide how to secure such a situation?
Well, usually with the traffic control, the police will take care of that right away. They'll deal with the MTA about getting buses rerouted. I don't know the area that if there's any kind of subways underneath, they would stop the subways.
Right.
And that train, if there was a train in that area, I do not know, they would just stop the subways completely until they know that everything is safe.
All right, Jim, we do want to let our viewers know that you're looking at live pictures right now. These are our cameras have just arrived there, so you are looking at live pictures. Jim, the one thing that I will say that you have noticed in the last little while since this happened about an hour ago, obviously it's 4:36. It's starting to get dark. So how will that complicate the efforts to secure the building, to make sure that everyone is out of that building, and to account for everyone who may live in that apartment?
There's plenty of lights carried by the FDNY that they'll have and they'll use to keep the area lit. The problem that it's nighttime wouldn't be that much of a problem, because they would have enough lights. And I could see in the apartments now, it's just that one corner that collapsed. It was something. Yeah, there's with the blue helmet. There is a collapsed person there. He's looking to see if there's anybody in the pile.
Right. Jim, thank you. Hang on for a moment. We want to go to one of your former colleagues. We're joined now by Thomas Van Essen, a former FDNY commissioner. Thomas, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you had a chance to see what everybody's watching on our newscast right now. Can you give us an assessment of what you're seeing for yourself?
Well, it looks, it's pretty obvious that the corner came down. To me, my gut is that they had a scaffold or something up there that they were investigating to see if anything was damaged, and they had it maybe anchored in a place that it couldn't take the weight, maybe recent rain and the problem that they were looking to investigate, and it all came together, and the whole side of the whole corner of that building came down. And as you were just talking about, the question is whether or not there's anybody in those rooms watching television and getting a shock of their lives, and now they're in the bottom on the street with a pile of debris on top of them. The good thing is it's light kind of stuff. It's not real heavy where you get crushed. I mean, you hope that it's a minor injury. Our guys got there really quick. They've been in there, I'm sure, already. They're reporting that there's no injuries, at least that they know of. Maybe somebody got hurt with debris and took off, went to the hospital. You don't know that. But it looks to me like they were pretty lucky and no serious injuries. And this is the reason why we passed that law a while back to have these buildings inspected. They look good. You look at a dryer or a washing machine right there, it's pretty heavy if it hits on the head. Mm-hmm. These buildings look good from the outside, but you can't tell because they're old. Right. You can't tell if there's structural damage. You need to be inspected. And you can see a cable there, it looks like from a scaffolding that might have been investigating the side of the building.
Yeah.
That's my gut. That,
Tom,
that it pulled it down.
When the camera pulls out, you can see, and in some of the video that we were looking at from Citizen App, that there was scaffolding on part of the building. What is remarkable as you look at our live pictures now is, the part of that building just fell away, and we're looking, you can see into, the details of people's lives inside their homes. Yeah. A few minutes ago, you could see the photograph of a family member who looked like was a U.S. service member. And again, you're looking here at live pictures. Talk us through these firefighters who are there at the bottom of the rubble. They clearly are going through the debris there. Take us through what it is strategically, how they are trying to get through all of that rubble.
Well, it makes me think that maybe they have a report that somebody's in there because they're doing it pretty delicately. They could easily get a big piece of equipment and just push it all out of the way, but they don't want to make it any worse for someone that might be trapped. So that could be the report they had. It's important to try to get somebody reputable on the street when they arrive to give them as best an estimate as they can get of how many, if anybody's in there. So I think that they're going to pull it apart pretty deliberately, and they'll find out. And I would be hopeful that anybody's in there is going to be able to get out, be okay.
It's just remarkable if we come away from this scene and there was no serious injuries, because that is such a busy part of the city. First of all, we're looking at an occupied building. Second of all, there's plenty of foot traffic that walks past it, and it's right next to a bus route. It is just amazing to me, and I'm praying that there is no one in there, but as you point out, we don't know really until the job is complete. Talk to me a little bit about what Rescue 3, I imagine, would be the first one there at the scene, and I don't know if you would include more at this point, how you deploy something like this. Tell me how you manage this from the ground right now, and who's in charge?
Well, there's a special operations chief that I'm sure has gotten there, been quite a while already, and deployed all the special units that have come. All the rescues, or at least 2 or 3 of them, will come if they're available. And there's a collapse unit in the Bronx also. So you get people who, it's not their first collapse. You get people that want to make sure nothing else falls on the people that are crawling in there or taking a chance. And I'm sure there's somebody further into it than what you can see right here. They come from a different direction. They might have come from inside the building. They might have reached a hole through the wall inside the building. That's probably the easiest way to see as can what's up against the building. So, they come from lots of different directions. Those tower ladders are up there really just to make sure that they don't see anything it looks like any more is going to fall. They don't want, you see all that stuff there. Those guys are pretty close to it. If that dryer falls right now, it's going to roll right on top of our guys. So those are all concerns, but their biggest concern is, rescuing someone who really needs it, and that's the first priority.
All right, Tom Van Essen, former FDNY, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. If you could just stand by for just a minute. We do want to talk to one of your former colleagues, also former FDNY Commissioner Dan Nigro, who's joining us now on the phone. Dan, can you hear us?
I can.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure you're looking at the live pictures that you're seeing from our cameras at the scene of this partial building collapse in the Morris Heights section of the Bronx. We want to go ahead and get your first impression of what you are seeing on our air right now.
Sure. You've already gotten a lot of good information from Jim Bullock and Tom Van Essen, who've been at these scenes themselves many times over their years in the department. So right now, what Tom said, our first priority is, of course, life. It's protecting the lives of those people in the surrounding areas. So we've already established a safe area that people should not be in other than our members operating. I'm sure the incident commander right now is either the chief of department or chief of operations or both. And we have our collapse, not just Rescue 3, but a whole package that responds on this type of situation with a few rescue companies and squad companies. You'll see 3 tower ladders that are already up in that area. Department of Buildings will come in. They'll do an evaluation of the rest of the building, of how stable it is for us and police ESU to work in and around it.
Dan, I'm going to interrupt you for one quick second,
sure.
if you don't mind. Jim Dolan has just arrived on the scene, so we want to go ahead and check in with him about what he is learning about the breaking news. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, Liz, I just want to set you up here so you can see exactly what's going on back there. You can see rescue workers all the way at the top of the building in those FDNY lifters right there. They are searching that area, the top of the building where this all started, for survivors, seeing exactly what happened. Matt, if you come down, you'll see another crew several floors below them. Again, this is a 6-story building. You see 2 crews searching the structure of the building for survivors, for any injured people who might be inside. And of course, there are also crews searching the rubble at the base. We can't see that from where we are. We're about a block away, but there are crews searching through the rubble that landed on the ground as well, looking for survivors. We have no reports of injured or survivors at this time, which shouldn't lead anybody to believe anything. We don't know exactly what's happening. We know it is an occupied building here in the Bronx, and that the fire department crews are here on the side scene, searching through the rubble and through the building for any survivors. We're going to send it back to you guys in the studio. We're going to see what we can learn here.
Jim, I know you got to run. You're going to try to get us some news gathering. I'm just curious, from your position, have you determined if you've spotted any of the residents of the building, or a location where they're set up, where residents of the building who have been evacuated are being told to go?
No, I'm sure that that's already set up, David, but we have not found that yet. We just got here on the scene just a couple of minutes ago, literally 3-4 minutes ago. Obviously, traffic around the area is extremely congested because so many streets are closed down right now. So we have people being kept at least a block and a half away from this scene so that they're not in the way of the rescue workers. But there usually is a place set up for survivors, for people who live in that building to go. We haven't found that yet, but we're going to start looking.
Okay. All right, Jim, we're going to let you work the scene right there. We're going to return now to Dan Nigro, who's on the phone with us, who's kind of talking us what firefighters are doing. And Dan, as we saw through Jim Dolan's live shot, is that firefighters are in the ladder buckets, and they're really trying to search those as best as they can from the outside looking in. Talk us through that.
Well, they're in a safe position. You know, the truck is positioned outside of a collapse zone, and the men that you see, the firefighters that you see, are looking into the various floors of the building. There's many things going on at once now. So we have members of the police department and the fire marshals polling people in the neighborhood, trying to get all the information they can as to who may be in the building, what exactly was going on, what kind of construction work that might have caused this, which would give us the ability to backtrack and see whether the construction work is still there, et cetera. Taking care of the people in the building, all of that's being done. OEM is on the scene, and they help us coordinate. I saw in the live shot, both the fire department and the police department have very good drones that we use right now. So drones are being used. Also,
Dan, I wanted to ask you on that front. You know, in your years as the commissioner and as a firefighter, watching in the background, you know, talk to me a little bit about some of the biggest improvements on dealing with the building collapses that the department can now deploy. You mentioned some of the high-tech stuff, but I imagine there's some other things that as well that the public might not be aware of.
Well, certainly the department has, from the time you know, I entered the department, which was 54 years ago, we have done the collapse units. The training that goes on to the members that respond to these is exponentially higher than it was 50 years ago. And the members trained 365 days a year on how to respond. And you heard Tom Von Essen say many of the members that have responded here have been to collapses before.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And this is not their first one. The chiefs that are there supervising are there to make sure we're keeping our members safe, we're keeping the public safe, and we're doing our best to search that rubble and inside the building as safely as possible and as quickly as possible.
Of course. Dan, can you just stand by for one quick second? Joe Torres, Eyewitness News reporter Joe Torres, has arrived at the scene as well. We want to go ahead and get the latest from him from the scene. Joe.
Liz, we're actually pretty close. We're directly across the street from the corner of this building collapse. We're at the corner of Hennessy and West Burnside. We're going to zoom up to show you what's happening now. You've got one tower ladder at the top of this 6-story building with a firefighter up there examining what he can see from that perspective. And you probably can't see it from the camera, but just to the left, there's an FDNY drone that is also at this moment circling the area, giving a bird's eye perspective and feeding information to firefighters on the ground about what that drone sees. As you can imagine, this corner, this intersection, completely blocked off by emergency personnel and first responders. Largely at this point, what we see, FDNY on the scene here. 2 tower ladders are actually up. And now we're going to slowly pan across what I want you to see on the other side, because we haven't heard any reports, Liz and David, of any injuries. What you see over there by the tree, those are EMS officers and first responders waiting for the go-ahead to go inside and bring out anyone who may be trapped or may have been hit by bricks or may have been injured in this collapse. I just talked to one of the police officials here on the scene, told us no reports of any injuries at this point. They also said they brought in cadaver dogs to sniff inside. No signs of any indications from the dogs that there's someone to rush in there and rescue. But again, back to the scene here, live at the corner of this 6-story building. We're just about an hour into what happened here in the Morris Heights section of the Bronx. Again, a corner of this 6-story residential building collapsed. It's way too early to even begin thinking about what it was that sparked this. You'd have to think, certainly, though, however, with the heavy rain that we had yesterday, that perhaps maybe that had something to do with it. Again, that comes much, much later. Right now, this is the initial first response, Liz and David, from FDNY here as they examine the scene. We don't see any ambulances close by. We haven't seen any that were coming in, and we haven't seen any that were going out. So we're going to send it back to you in the studio. I'll try and gather some more info from here on the ground, but that's the very latest here in Morris Heights.
Joe, before you start getting more news that you can at the scene, has anyone told you if they had any warning? Like, was there sounds before the collapse occurred? Was there something to suggest that something was going to happen? It's remarkable to me that we haven't heard of any injuries at this time, and I'm praying that stays that way. But I'm wondering if they had some heads up that this thing was starting to give way and people just cleared out of the way.
David, it's hard to imagine that they would not have had some sort of heads up, or that somebody would have heard something. I mean, this is a highly populated area, residential where that building is, and then across the street and up the road here on Burnside, it gets heavily commercial. So this is the Bronx. It is an very urban area, lots of people here all the time. Unfortunately, David, I haven't bumped into anyone just yet who perhaps may have heard the warning sign, may have heard some sort of cracks, may have seen 1 or 2 bricks falling early before everything else came down. But you'd have to guess, yes, that at some point someone somewhere saw something that would have indicated, hey, we've got to move and move quickly.
Joe, before we let you go, I don't know what your vantage point is in terms of looking at the debris and all these wires that are hanging, looking into people's homes that literally an hour ago were still there and livable, and now are just obliterated and on the sidewalk. I mean, the video that we are seeing here on our screen, it is jarring. It is scary.
I think I see a little girl's jacket there sticking.
Yeah.
Just another reminder of humanity there.
And you could see before a picture of a loved one hanging on the wall that was still hanging on the wall.
what you're seeing, Liz and David, is more than what I can see from this perspective, at least for what's on the ground. I've got fire trucks that are kind of blocking my view. I can see, let's see, from the top down, 6, 5, 4. I can see from the 3rd floor up. And yeah, I'm looking at the same thing you are up there. And yes, those were apartments that you can, I see a bed on the, 6, 5, 4th floor with the sheet blowing there. You can only imagine if somebody was in there or dear Lord, you don't even want to think about it. But the ceiling came down from 5 onto 4, and then it almost looks like it pancaked down. But yes, if you're seeing the debris pile on the ground, I can't see that just yet. But yes, exactly, Liz. It's bedrooms, it's kitchens, it's bathrooms that are now on the floor of a street here in the Bronx. It's just staggering.
All right, Joe, we're going to go ahead and let you work the scene. Dan Nigro, former commissioner of the FDNY, is joining us on the phone, right? It's still Dan that we're speaking to? If the control room could just confirm.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Dan Nigro is still on the phone with us. And I do just also want to say that current commissioner Laura Kavanaugh tweeted out just a few minutes ago that the FDNY is focused on life. We have no reports of any injuries at this time, but our members, including our K-9 team, are looking for any people trapped. Dan, it is remarkable when you look at this video that at this point, and hopefully it stays this way, that we are talking about no injuries at this point.
It certainly is. Perhaps, I see that there are remnants of the scaffold that were there. People would not be walking under that corner of the building when it came down, but I don't know. But we'll certainly find out. You heard Joe say that EMS was there. And another change that has taken place over the years is the fire department now has highly trained rescue medics. They train with the firefighters to actually enter scenes like this. If we did have an injured person in a very dangerous situation, they can start medical care on them even before we get them out into the street. And I'm sure they're standing by on the scene as we watch this on the perimeter and ready at a moment's notice to go into action. So it's going to be a long night. Certainly, we have equipment set up now to monitor any movement in the building. We can do that, and we will do that. Our collapse units on the scene bring that equipment with them, and that's what's going on now, besides what you might see here among this search. And it's very important, again, to get the police and fire marshals out in the community and ask questions, find out what was going on, if anybody is reporting anybody missing, and where they may have been. And that's going on as we speak.
Right. I would imagine they'd also be combing through records of who lives in those buildings to make sure that they match and that no one is actually missing. Dan, you had mentioned they're going to bring extra equipment in, obviously, as it continues to get much darker and we head into nighttime. What kind of equipment are we talking about? Well,
besides the equipment that the fire department has, the police department has, OEM has access to any amount of lighting we may need. I'm sure some of that lighting is already on the scene, and this will be lit up very adequately for the FDNY and NYPD to work overnight, as they will. We have the ability to shore up part of the building while we're working to keep it from collapsing if that's necessary. So all of that will be evaluated, and hopefully we'll have a Christmas miracle, and we'll have poor people without a place to sleep tonight, or at least not in their own home, but at least no one injured or killed.
We are certainly hoping the very same. All right, Dan, if you could just stand by with us for a few more minutes. We are going to take a quick break right now, and then we are going to begin on the backside of that break with Eyewitness News at 5 o'clock with Sandra Bookman and Bill Ritter.
This is breaking news from Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And what a day of breaking news it is indeed. Look at that. The picture almost says that all. We're following this for the past hour. A partial building collapse in the Bronx, the Morris Heights section.
An entire side of that building, really a corner, just peeled away. Investigators on the scene right now trying to figure out if there is anyone underneath all that rubble.
And we say partial collapse, but that means some of that is still standing, and it could come down as well. We don't know, they don't know yet, and that is one of the big problems. Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan is live at the scene with the very latest. Jim?
Bill, we just want to give you a quick update as to what's going on the ground here. You see all the fire department equipment here. I want to just point out over here, and then again further over here, you see all these ambulances that are standing by. Well, they're standing by for injured people, but so far at least they are not being used. That's the most important thing right now. They have no sign of injuries and nobody dead so far. It's still very early in this. The scene is back there. Matt, take a look. You can see the rescue workers working up there on the top, and they are working below that as well. They are looking for signs of survivors, looking for signs of life or injured people there, and so far at least we have no word that they have found anybody, which so far at least we want to keep qualifying this is good news. Just a short while ago, we spoke with a young woman named Mary who was on her way home from school when all of this happened. Mary saw a lot of this. When you saw the building coming down, what was that like? What were you seeing?
Oh no, like it was a lot. It was a lot of sand. Like my eyes, I couldn't see nothing. My eyes were hurting because the sand was going to my eyes. Like it was like I was not really seeing nothing. But it was really bad. Like I was just thinking about the people that was down there and the people in the building.
Yeah, Mary knows people who live in that building. She has not been in touch with them yet since all of this happened. A lot of people have told us that there really wasn't much noise. Now, some of the people we spoke with were inside their homes when this happened, but they said it really didn't make much sound. They didn't hear the building come down. Even somebody I spoke with was right across the street, didn't hear this collapse, but heard the sirens and heard the reaction of people. Again, 6-story building partially collapsed here in the Bronx. Reporting live, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Jim, if we could talk to you a little bit longer, Jim, if that's all right, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah,
when you look up, what do you see? Because I know what we saw, and I want to get what you see from a ground floor.
Bill, let's take a look. So what we're seeing is all this fire department equipment on the ground, and we can see the people up in the building, the fire department up in the building, outside the building, but on those fire department ladders, searching that building, searching the roof of the building and the apartments on that corner. Remember, this was the collapse was mostly confined to the corner of this building, and that's where the fire department has focused their efforts to see if there's anybody inside. Matt, you see one of those is off to the left on that top floor. Matt, I don't know if you can see that, but you can see his light looking into those apartments, trying to see if anybody is still inside, if they need to go into those apartments to find anyone. That one has moved. That apparatus on the left has moved in the last few minutes to that 6th floor to see if anybody is up there. You can see that they are trying to find anybody inside. Bill?
Yeah, it's awfully weak wood, it looks like, to us here. Now, we're far away from it, as are you, but it certainly looks interesting. Jim, stay on the scene. We're going to get Joe Torres on the line, right?
Yes. Before we go to Joe, just want to tell you, Mary Eric Adams, as well as the FDNY Commissioner, Laura Avenue. We are told they are on the way to the scenes. We're sure to be hearing from them shortly. But before that, we're going to turn to our Joe Torres, who is also on scene there in the Bronx. I understand, Joe, you are right across the street from that building.
Sandra and Bill, that's correct. Let's pick it up where Jim just left off. There are now 2 tower ladders, getting a really up-close look at the corner of that building. And as we go up, perhaps you can see the drone there in front of the tower ladder on the right. The tower ladders are actually higher than the drone. So the drone feeding information based on what it can see, probably from a wide angle. You've got the tower ladder on the right, and you can see almost a flashing light in that top floor apartment. That's actually coming from the other tower ladder on the left, which went up probably in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So that's because when we were on with you about an hour ago, or about 30 minutes ago, only one tower ladder was sort of examining. So they've secured the area on that side of the building, safe enough to put up the second tower ladder, and are now getting a vantage point from two different perspectives high up, as well as the drone. Trying to catch up with a couple of people here like Jim did, of who saw and who heard what happened. Haven't had much luck. From an ESMS perspective, the guys across the street haven't moved. And Bill and Sandra, that's good news in one way, that there hasn't been anyone sort of taken away in an ambulance, rushed to a hospital because they were caught in the falling bricks and in the falling debris. But the hope and prayers remain that there's no one that was either injured or hurt or killed in what happened here. Again, yeah, like Jim said, it's largely the corner of this building, but you don't see any other lights on the inside. You don't see any other activity in any other apartments. You'd have to think the building by now was certainly evacuated quickly after what had to be a thunderous roar when this happened right around, what, 3:38 this afternoon. That's the latest from the corner here. Sandra and Bill, we get any more, we'll come back to you, but we'll send it back to you guys there in the studio.
Quick question, Joe. To that end, you talked about the fact that this seems isolated to that corner. You don't see any lights in the building. Do we know where those other residents are? I'm assuming that is there a bus there? Have you seen anyone that may have lived in that building and some of the other apartments not directly impacted by this collapse?
I haven't seen, Sandra, any sort of transport that would involve moving some of the tenants or residents from that building to another location. As for the people who live there, I haven't personally bumped into them, and I'm guessing they're not nearby at the moment, as probably some investigators want to question them about what they saw and what they heard. But no buses, no transports, large transports of people who are here. I think at this point, and the professionals will know better than I, that this is more of a stabilization operation at this point, making sure that the building isn't going to collapse any further and that people are far away from the scene safely enough that if something does come down, no one else gets hurt.
Yes, as long and while they're looking for people, any kind of survivors or victims underneath that pile. Joe, really good points, Joe, and I appreciate it. We're going to get to you in a little bit. Again, if I can talk to the control room for a second and just say, we want former Commissioner Dan Nigro to be ready. We're going to bring in our Lee Goldberg to talk about what might have happened with all the rain we got here and whether that may have affected it a little bit, what that would do to some sort of building that's under construction. And we want to bring Dan in to figure out based on what Lee said and what he's seeing, what he sees. So, Lee, you have some viewpoints on all this about the rain.
Well, just sort of listening to a compilation of all of our experts from the FDNY and talking about the weather. Number one, in the Bronx, we got about 1.5 inches of rain overnight. I mean, not outrageous, but 1.5 inches of rain. But then coupled with that, just looking at the winds around Morris Heights, about 40-mile-per-hour gusts. And then some of our experts saying, you know, listen, the scaffolding there, they may have been looking at the building. Did that put extra stress on the building with the rain underneath destabilizing the ground along with the wind? You have to think that wind potentially could be a factor. Also for these firefighters now, they're still dealing with 30, 40-mile-per-hour gusts into the evening hours. So that could be challenging. It's not all the time, but a gust come through. So they have to be careful of that. And then, of course, these poor residents that are displaced from their homes, these wind chills are dropping into the 20s tonight. So very, very cold for anybody who has to be away from their home, and again for the firefighters as well, guys.
Good.
All right, yeah.
Does it look to you a little bit like, Lee, when we saw that close-up, that it got kind of wet up there, or was that just me?
I can't make that out. I mean, listen, I'm certain that, you know, that whole area, especially the underside, the underground, I mean, it's very wet. There's a lot of standing water around there earlier.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Lee.
As Bill said, former Commissioner Dan Nigro is on the phone with us. As you listen to what Lee said, Mr. Nigro, when you look at a scene like this, is weather, the impact a lot of water, a lot of wind may have had on the facade there, is that something that that FDNY investigators will be looking at?
Well, I think what's important for us now, and you know, that's important information, is how did that affect not only this corner of the building, but if somehow it was undermined by the water or excess water on the roof, what about the rest of the stability of the rest of the building? I mean, we know certainly no one will be back in this building, living in this building anytime soon.
Right.
And OEM and the Red Cross will be working on finding places for them to stay because they won't be going back into this building tonight, that's for sure. And if the weather had something to do with it, the big question will be, how did it affect the rest of the building? A corner of a building is very important. Of course, anyone who's ever played with building blocks as a child would know that if you take the corner out, sometimes the rest of it comes down, which makes it extremely dangerous. And whatever caused that part of it to come down, is it likely to cause more of the building to come down in the near future? So all of these things are being evaluated now, and I'm sure there are engineers from the building department already on scene and working on these problems as we speak.
And apropos of that, because that raises a whole other, a whole nother door to open. We talked about it at the beginning of the show that this is a possibility. We don't know. And that's one of the issues here. We just don't know. So what does it do for the firefighters, for your former teams, to be down there looking through the rubble, trying to be careful, and knowing that the whole thing could be quite compromised?
Well, the chief's responsibility in these situations is very great because they're responsible for the safety of the public and the members, and they have to use that risk-reward equation that if we can ascertain that no one was there, and I'm sure the detectives and fire marshals will be looking for any surveillance cameras, maybe from across the street, that they can get and take a look at, and it would tell you if somebody at the moment of collapse was standing in that area. That would be an important tool. But the chief has to evaluate how much risk they're willing to put the members under. The members will do what they need to do, and they don't get the name the bravest for nothing. They certainly will risk their lives for others, but that evaluation is going on now on the scene.
And in a situation like this, some of that new technology certainly does help and helps keep firefighters safe when they're trying to do a job like this. As we said, Liz mentioned earlier, in that collapse at the garage downtown, that drone, mechanical dogs going inside instead of firefighters really did help them do their job and keep them safe.
That's right. That's something, tool we didn't have years ago. We have cameras now. We can get into voids and see into these areas remotely. So that's all going on now, and hopefully that will help. But there's no substitute for brave men and women on the scene that can do what they have to do.
Well,
should there be people in need.
Dan Nigro, well put indeed. And I appreciate all your help and assistance today, your expertise and insight today as we watch this unfold. Dan, thank you very much. Happy holidays, and fingers crossed down there. Thank you so much. From the former commissioner to the woman who replaced the former commissioner, the current commissioner, Laura Kavanaugh. Commissioner, thank you for joining us with Bill Ritter and Sandra Brooklyn.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you heard your predecessor talk about the drones and the cameras and how much different all this technology is. Explain really what you've seen first, and then second, if you could talk about what the technology is at place right now and how that's helping you.
Absolutely. So I don't think I could say it better than Commissioner Nigro, but they're not the bravest for nothing. Our members are right now. This is a live scene, so I think that's really important to emphasize. This happened not very long ago, and we are still in active search and rescue and recovery mode. And as he mentioned, that is everything from our members putting their own lives on the line, using their hands to go through this rubble, to using all the technology we have available to us, from our drones overhead, our robotics unit that can help us see into areas where there might be a victim that we can't see, as well as with our canine units who help us spot where there could be victims so we can focus on those areas, and then all the specialized training that our members have. We have a rubble pile at our training academy for this very reason. So our firefighters, our EMTs, our medics are all specially trained for this kind of exercise, and they are at work right now using their training.
in a city where the infrastructure, so much of it is aged infrastructure. We've obviously seen a collapse like this before, and that certainly is a concern when you go to a scene like this, that you're dealing with a building that has some years and maybe quite a lot of wear and tear on it.
Yeah, New York City has old housing stock. It's also an incredibly complex and dense city. And then I'd also just remind folks, our first responders go in within minutes, right? So they may only have limited information, but they need to go in right away to try to save lives. So it's a very complex operation for them. They're also highly trained and ready to do so. And certainly, we're praying that if there is anyone inside, that we are able to find them.
Have you gotten any word, Commissioner, as to what the damage may be to things that we're looking to be standing, which may not stand?
So this is unfolding. We do have DOB on scene. As soon as we complete our search and rescue, they will go to work on assessing the building. But right now, all we know is that, this was an active building, a building in use, a mixed-use building with both residential and commercial. And because of that, we're going to presume until we know for certain that someone could be in there, and we're going to keep searching until we've confirmed whether or not that's the case.
You said commercial buildings. Do you know what's on that first floor? Do you happen to know? We don't know yet. We have some.
We believe it's a store of some kind, most likely a bodega.
That's what we saw. We just didn't know whether it was still standing since 2021, and just don't understand what's happening. But what could happen is there may be some people there, and that's what you guys are and gals are trying to figure out, doing it safely. And are you worried for your troops that might be down there? This thing could happen in a flash, right?
Yeah, well, I always worry about my members. They do dangerous work every day. Certainly today is no different. But like I say, they have such incredible training, such incredible professionalism. I know they are going to do this as safely as they can, even in extraordinarily dangerous scenarios.
Apropos, Commissioner, of you're talking about how old these buildings are and how do you go about, measuring them and judging them every day. There have been 178 violations in the past 2 years. Just on this building alone, we've gotten that from city records tonight. And that's just sort of staggering fault because staggering stat because those are human beings in there. 178 violations. I just ask the people out there, ask you, Commissioner, would you want to live in a building that had that kind of violations over just a 2-year period?
I think I would just say my members go in no matter the scenario, no matter what the building looks like. And, it's really to them I have to give all the thanks tonight.
All right. Commissioner Laura Kavanaugh, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are hoping everyone down there is and remains safe, and that hopefully we get lucky this evening and there is no one trapped in the rubble there.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Yeah, that's our hope as well. Thank you.
We have got a team of reporters that are on that scene in the Bronx. Among them, Eyewitness News reporter Lucy Yang. Lucy.
Well, Sandra, we're on the rooftop of the building catty corner to where this accident happened today. We have a direct bird's eye view of the collapse. You can see how these tenants' homes were completely sliced open, how they collapsed into a pile of rubble below, and you can see just fragments of their lives left in what is still standing of this part of the building. The fire department, you can see, is on the scene, very active here. Just at the top of the hour, we got word that no victims have been located in their primary search of the rubble and in the building. So that is the best news you could hope for in a situation like this, where a part of a building suddenly collapsed and no one was trapped in the rubble. That is in their primary search of the collapsed building. Of course, they'll do a digger dive into the scene as they declare it safe to do so. So this is a very dramatic view of the collapse. You can see how just one floor fell on top of the next. The top floor is still, Anthony, are you on this top floor? Is still fairly intact. The exterior walls, of course, are gone, so we can see directly into these apartments. Of course, we're waiting for word on what could have possibly triggered such a collapse. I spoke with a few residents in this particular building where I'm standing who said they were out, they were eating today, and they saw the building go down, and it was just so surreal, something you just really can't even fathom or expect until you just keep looking at it right in front of you to underscore how real this collapse was.
Wow. You put it in perspective, Lucy, 108-year-old building in New York City. There are a lot of them. I live in one of those, and I know that we get inspected all the time. This one got inspected, and over the last 2 years, they had violations numbering 178. Those people perhaps deserved more than that. Let's just hope that they fixed them. But then what happened now to this? All right, Lucy, thank you. Stay on the scene for us. When you get information, Lucy, we'll get right back to you.
Of course, top of mind right now is to make sure
Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Top of mind right now is to make sure no one is trapped inside that building. Also, at some point, I guess they will turn to trying to stabilize what remains of that structure. Part of the investigation going forward will be to try and figure out exactly why this happened, and everything is on the table at this point. Lee, you pointed out that, you know, there at some point, weather, water, the wind might have been a factor with further weakening a facade that already obviously had some issues.
You know, you hear more and more about the description of this, and you look at the top of that building, because I was thinking more underneath and the ground being compromised. But what's the drainage like on the roof? I mean, that's a corner. Yep. Is it pitched such that you have a lot of water accumulating in that particular corner? And it was later in the day, so a lot of that rain had ended, and I would assume with the wind had dried. But, you know, is the building such that it absorbed some of that water and that weight was too much, along with the scaffolding? Could have been a combination of things, along with the wind exacerbation.
All really good questions, Lee, and we're going to lean on you as the night progresses here to figure out all of this. I want to go back to Jim Dolan, who is also one of our 3 reporters at the scene, and he talked tonight with someone who saw the collapse. Jim?
Yeah, Bill, we're going to get to that in just a second. I just want to point out that there still FDNY here arrived from various parts of the city. Everybody coming to pitch in there. I'm looking right at a rescue operations truck that is trying to get into the scene, but again, it's crowded and it's hectic. Those firefighters here to help out in this rescue. Our drones here, we have seen some of those drones up in the building, near the building, looking again for survivors as all this happens. At the base of this building, and I'm not sure you've reported this yet, at the base of this building is a bus stop. This happened right after school let out. There were almost certainly people there trying to get on that bus right where this building collapsed. We spoke with a young man coming home from school just a couple minutes ago, Zion, who saw the building come down. You saw people inside the building. Do you mean you saw them coming down?
No, like inside the deli that's down there.
Oh, on that first floor.
Yeah. It came from the top first, and it just started falling down everywhere. And while time going, the thing just kept falling down over and over again. Just keep falling.
There are drones directly above us right now working this scene, trying to find survivors. There are firefighters still showing up. We saw a robotic dog just a few minutes ago that will be used to go through this rubble. The FDNY using all of its tools to make sure people are safe here. Bill and Sandra?
Yes, Jim, listening to the interview, the young man, I think you said his name was Zion, what he said about people being inside that deli when he saw the building start to collapse, it certainly makes you wonder whether or not there might be someone still trapped in that building underneath that rubble.
Yeah, that was his concern as well. We've spoken to a number of people who know people in that building, but we haven't spoken to anybody yet who's gotten in touch with them, who's been able to get in touch with them. Obviously, people did get out of that building. We know that for sure, but we don't know. And so far, there are no reports of injured or dead. All of these good signs. There are a lot of unused ambulances here right now, and we're happy to see that. But obviously, this is still a young situation, a new situation, still unfolding. Sandra.
All right, Jim, we want to put a picture that we got. Is it this one right here? This is the video we have live happening, and you see that blowtorch kind of thing that's going on there. We don't know what that is for right now, what they're using it for, but it looks like, and I would anticipate that they're trying to get some of this metal off and get them underneath, look for somebody underneath all that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge pile of mortar and rubble and cement and whatever else They were putting in buildings back in 1915. Again, this building, 108 years old, 178 violations over the last 2 years. To my untrained ears, sounds like a lot. Yes. So perhaps this building did have some structural issues that had not been taken care of. The FDNY working hard on the scene, as they always do. You see them moving pieces of the rubble by hand, because that's the only way they're going to be able to get into anyone that's possibly trapped, and do so in a way kind of delicately, so that you don't injure anyone that may simply be hurt or trapped under the rubble.
Think for a second about what these young men and women must be thinking, knowing that above them is part of a structure. It's a partial collapse. It's not a fully collapse. Okay. Jim Dolan is back on the scene. We're asking our reporters the minute they get something to get back with us, and that's exactly what's happening. Jim has an eyewitness to talk to. Jim,
you want to say something?
Hold on one second. Jim? Yeah, Bill, just want to talk with Unique here. Unique was walking down the street when this happened. Unique, tell me what you saw.
Yeah, I was walking up the block, and then the building just started falling. And that's about it.
Unique, a lot of people have said it wasn't very loud. Did you think it was loud?
It was mad loud. I was right there. I was walking right up the block. Yeah. And it fell down. Look.
Yeah. And you tell me what you were thinking when you saw this building collapsing right in front of your eyes. You probably know people who live there.
Yeah, I was scared. I'm thinking, I hope everybody's okay. And, God is good. I'm okay. So, I'm sad.
A lot of smoke?
A lot of smoke, a lot of noise, a lot of all of that.
How long did it take, do you think, for the fire department to get here?
Not that long, because they right down the block.
Yeah.
I live right there.
Yeah. Have you talked to anybody who lives in the building? You know anybody who's...
Yeah, I know a couple of people that live there. I'm from around here, so yeah, I know people.
Scary. Well, thank you, Unique. I appreciate your time and your perspective on this. Obviously, a lot of people on the street. I said a minute ago, there's a bus stop right at the bottom of the building. So there were people around. It was just after school let out. A lot of kids were coming home from school at that time, Bill and Sandra.
Can you see what we're seeing, Jim, with the blowtorches and things by the fire department? Are you looking at that?
We are blocked by so many fire department apparatus. We cannot see that. We wanted to stay out with some people who might have seen this to get their perspective on it. So that's, but Bill, that's pretty standard, right? They're using those torches to go through that rubble to make sure nobody's trapped underneath. Let's hope they don't know somebody's trapped underneath.
We're all keeping our fingers crossed tonight. Jim, thank you very much. We're going to toss it out to Joe Torres, who actually probably has a better view of what is going on because he's right across the street from that building. Joe?
Bill, if you're still looking at that picture, Sandra, from overhead and you're seeing those sparks fly, what that is scaffolding. There was scaffolding on the sidewalk, as there is in so many apartment buildings and buildings across New York City, that went apparently around the building here. So when the collapse came down, it came down on the scaffolding, collapsed the scaffolding, and what they're cutting now are those braces that you often see on the scaffolding, perhaps to get further access inside. I think it's one of those saws that cuts metal, and they're literally chopping it into pieces so they can get further access to the inside beyond the rubble, what's there. Just to update you all I can, in what we've seen here in the last couple of minutes, 2 of the tower ladders on the right have come down. You've got that other tower ladder on the far left that has inched its way closer and closer to the buildings for a better look at what they can see inside, perhaps examining the building close up, looking for any cracks or any indications of a collapse that might be on that corner of the building as well. The drone has been up and about, high and low, feeding information, and we should let you know there are power lines here, so flying the drone is a challenge in and of itself. Moving the tower ladders is not easy. It never is in New York City, and now you've got the situation here on the ground as well, as firefighters try and examine and get a better picture of what they can find on the inside. To further Jim's point, again, I'm looking off to my left, EMS waiting on hold with an ambulance nearby and the crews ready to jump in should their services be needed, but again, haven't seen that. So that's the latest, and off to my right, the drone going up again. So it's tough to follow it. Take our word for it, Bill and Sandra, but you'll see it perhaps jump into your picture there, in a moment.
We just saw it.
As it gets another look. There it is.
Yeah, we saw it.
Yep.
The green
so
one,
it's got the 4 green lights and then some red lights, and then on the bottom you'll see some flashing. So that's the drone, and real-time information, Bill, that they're feeding to the firefighters on the ground in terms of where to go, where not to go, what to do, what not to do.
Nice job.
Send it back to you.
We see your camera shooting at it right now, Joe. Joe, interrupt us whenever you want and let us know if you have something new. We appreciate that.
Will do.
We want to go back to former Commissioner of the FDNY, Dan Nigro. And Dan, you heard Joe talking about all this. You see this. It came into play big time when you became commissioner. And this is the whole purpose of this, right? To have those drones. So those
the eyes in the sky.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not looking up with fear. They're looking down with real dedication.
It's an important part of the fire department package now that we have. You saw very good pictures before of the members using the partner saws with metal cutting blades to cut away that scaffolding. Those scaffolds, they're ubiquitous in the city. There's 2 reasons why they would be up. One, if the building had a potential for falling bricks or whatnot, they have to keep them up. Or 2, they were actively working on the building for some reason. So that's what we'd want to know. What purpose were these scaffolds up for? Were there problems? You can see the very top, the parapet around the building has been replaced, repaired. It's not original. That could have been a problem why the scaffolding was up. But they're cutting away those bars to get in and get under that particular debris pile. While they're doing that, other members of the department are monitoring, and the building department, the stability of the rest of the building and the area right above where they're working. So they're also very important members of the team to keep those that are actively conducting the search as safe as possible.
It's a team effort. You see the sparks flying. You see the firefighters seemingly all over the pile. But this is very delicate work because you want to make sure anyone that might be trapped is also safe from any damage you might do while you're trying to get to them. And in addition to that, of course, you don't want anything falling down on the firefighters as they are trying to do their jobs.
Sure, and right now you can see one of the dogs is up working, up on top of the pile. That dog is trained to search for any people that might be there. So all the tools available to FDNY and NYPD are in use tonight, and we're just praying for a positive outcome.
It's just amazing to see this, and I know you saw this before. I haven't talked to you about it, but I assume you did, because in that pile was a twin bed, and you just wonder, who lived there, where they are, how they're doing, what's happened to them. There are people stories in this collapse, Daniel. Yeah, we hope, that one would think that had this happened at 2 a.m. and there were children in that twin bed, the outcome would be different. The time of day maybe was worked in our favor. We'll have to see. But maybe most of the people that live in the building were not in the building at the time. That's possible, too. But we, as this work goes on, we'll find out, and we'll be ever hopeful. You see that dog walking around through the pile, sniffing. That's, again, just one of the many tools that we have. But the most important tool is all of those men and women you see that have to just hands-on pull pieces of this debris out so they can get in there and under it and ensure that there's no one in need.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we have seen this kind of scene a time or two. I just want to tell anyone who might be joining us just now, again, this is a massive building collapse in the Bronx. The Commissioner Nigro spoke about the fact that timing may have been a factor in terms of how many people were actually in the building. Apparently, this happened around 3:38 this afternoon, 3:38. That building is at 1915 Billingsley Terrace in the Morris Heights section of the Bronx. Let's hope that perhaps people were at work, at school. So they were not in any of those apartments when the facade crumbled.
Dan, if you don't have any other plans for the night, we'd love to have you stay on and get your opinion and get your take on what the commissioner, your replacement, you appointed, and sort of the mayor, the first woman to be head of the FDNY, and the mayor, and making it this. I do want to say one thing, something to chew on, and get your opinion, and then we're going to move to one of our reporters on the scene. 5 open violations, according to the Bureau of Buildings, Department of Buildings website, and it seems that there are, the most serious is a construction violation, including states broken mud sills with inadequate support for vertical members throughout. And I just did a quick thing on Google, and I see that mud sills are, in fact, supporting sills on a building or a bridge resting directly on a base and especially on the earth. And this one was starting on a base. So we see what we maybe, we don't know, maybe one of the problems here. And what's your gut feeling on that, Dan?
Well, certainly, as Lee spoke before about the weather, if we had some undermining in an area that was already eroded and damaged, in the way this comes down, it tells you that it wasn't just the weight of the floor above that caused the complete collapse. It looks like, something gave way below and the floors above came down piece by piece. So we have to see how serious. That sounds like a very serious violation. Some of the violations are less serious from a safety viewpoint.
Right.
Maybe not less serious from the people living in the building, from their comfort, but that could be a very serious piece here.
And as was mentioned earlier, the Department of Buildings is also on the scene now. Of course, the fire department, FDNY, needs to finish their job of rescue and recovery at this point. We want to search and recovery, I should say. I want to turn now to Eyewitness News reporter Lucy Yang, who is on a rooftop right across the street from this building. Lucy, I understand you have some more information about some of these violations.
Well, Sandra, that's right. We are catty-cornered to the collapsed building. We have a direct view into the wreckage on the ground and into these exposed apartment buildings. You see the drone outside the building right now, giving officials a clear view into what is happening inside. Firefighters are on the scene. Now, just a short while ago, they were removing the rubble by hand, bucket by bucket. They have now pulled back as more debris is coming down, being knocked down from the scaffolding, so they're stepped back a bit for their own safety, but we can see they are poised to get back to the job of removing this rubble. It's all being done by hand at this moment. They are very careful to make sure, in case there is somebody underneath, that they are not harmed in the process of removing this. Dogs have been on. Phil Ritter talked about that a short while ago. And Sandra, to what you mentioned, the violation. There are numerous violations on this building, 5 open violations according to the DOB's website. The most serious, we're told, seems to be a construction violation. It states broken mud sills, inadequate support for vertical members throughout. Our anchors have been talking about that a few moments ago. We don't know if that is the cause of this particular collapse. It's too early to say what triggered an entire section of this corner of the building to come crumbling down, and to leave these apartments exposed like that, it's so dramatic out here. It's so surreal to look at this scene like this. These were people's homes that suddenly just gave way. And again, so on the scene, we see firefighters are stepped back. They have stopped pulling rubble from the scene. We have cranes here. We have a ladder up here. Somebody is poking at the scaffolding that surrounds this particular building. They're taking it down. We've seen it come down bit by bit, and the firefighters are just stepped back for their own safety. There is a drone on scene. There is a dog that's been pulled back as well for its safety. And we are here just monitoring this scene, trying to get the latest information to you. But again, this is what you see at a collapsed building in the Bronx. I'm Lucy Yang for Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you guys in the studio.
Lucy, I have a quick question for you, just to clarify. Those firefighters that have pulled back, what's falling is deliberately being brought down by other firefighters themselves, correct? Nothing is just falling spontaneously from that collapsed building.
Correct, Sandra. If I can have our cameraman Anthony go to that The fire ladder over there, they're the ones knocking down, purposely knocking down the scaffolding, the extra debris that fell on top of the scaffolding, rather than have it collapse on its own. They're taking parts of that down. We've seen planks of wood being knocked over after they pulled the firefighters back, so they're not hurt by anything. And there seems to be, I don't see them knocking anything down right now. Maybe they're assessing, I don't know. But firefighters have stopped cleaning up the debris for the moment.
Yes,
but we saw them just a few minutes ago. You see the buckets. They were doing it by hand, bucket by bucket.
It looks like, almost looks, and listen, we're all looking at the same picture and we're trying to figure out what it is. It does look, and because we want to give New Yorkers and everyone in the tri-state the ability and the opportunity to see this unfold in real time, because this is what real life looks like when you're a firefighter trying to figure out what to do. But Lucy, it looks like they are trying to do something, and we're not sure exactly what it is, but we're standing by to keep an eye on it. And it could very well be that they're bringing things down by hand and trying to get some of that. We've always been surprised by that dryer or washer that was on its side, by the pile you see, standing at sitting at a 45-degree angle right there, ready to come down. And if they're going to be there, start to do this before the bulldozers come, they're going to really want to get that before they, give up any hope of finding anyone underneath this rubble. And that's what this is all about right now.
And it is a reminder that it is painstaking work. Not only are they having to do a lot of it by hand, but they are also putting themselves in harm's way, which the FDNY, they won't stop until they are sure there is no one else inside that building or underneath that rubble.
You heard Daniel Nigro, the former commissioner of the FDNY, call it the pit. And he fought at the pit. He lost so many of the people who he served and who served him during 9/11. And when you see this kind of activity on a very small scale compared to what it was down there at World Trade Center, you realize that, you said it perfectly, Sandra, this is a very painstaking proposition, and you do not rush, and you've got to go on very carefully, because one thing is moved and it could cause quite the domino effect. Lucy, where exactly are you? How close are you? Can you see as close as you're doing with the camera we have here?
Well, I am, Bill, on the roof of the building catty corner to the collapse. So I am very close to the scene. There's nothing obstructing our view, which is why we're getting such a dramatic shot for you from the camera. I do want to say that around 5 o'clock we did get notice that the primary search of the scene did not locate any victims inside the rubble. So that was a great first primary search. That way, and that's a big exhale here at a scene like this.
Yes,
it is.
It doesn't mean that the search is completely over, but it just means their primary search, they did not find any victims trapped in the rubble, and that's tremendous. So they can take this process methodically and carefully. Yes, Sandra?
Oh, no. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Lucy.
It dictates a rhythm to their removal of the debris out here.
They do know how to do this job well. No, you have said a mouthful, Lucy. You have an excellent view. And really, if you live in a building in New York City, and most of us are living in buildings that have a bit of age on them, you're watching this with interest. Many people live in buildings with scaffolding around scaffolding, unfortunately, that's been up for years. And you wonder sometimes why it's up so long. So many questions here. Is there anyone hurt? Why did this building collapse? Why did it have these open violations? Why did it have so many violations over the last 2 years? So people are watching this with interest because it could be the corner of almost any building in the city.
And we know if you live in New York City and your building has been scaffolded before, you know that they do it to protect us from walking down the sidewalk and getting hit by a brick or something else. But we know now for sure that scaffolding does not prevent the side of a building from coming down. Scaffolding does not hold up when the side of a building comes down, no matter how fancy or artistic some of these new scaffoldings may be as you walk the streets of New York.
We're going to turn it over again to Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan, who is been outside this scene this evening. Jim?
Sandra, we've been talking to folks out on the street who were nearby when this happened. Remember, the streets were crowded. This is just before 4 o'clock this afternoon. School had just let out. People were leaving work. People were going out to get groceries, standing in line waiting for a bus right at that intersection. We spoke with a couple of people, one whose sister was going to the grocery store on the first floor of this building, and to a young man who was right there when it happened. Let's hear from them now.
I just see a lot of stuff that's falling down. I didn't even know it was the building falling until I really looked, man. And then it was the building that's there like that.
Now, you saw all this. When did it occur to you? How long did it take before you realized, wow, that building's coming down?
Like, it took me a good minute, like 2 minutes.
She was about to go in to buy cat food when the structure just fell in the corner. And she called me. I ran outside, found her, sent her home, stayed outside to see if anything else was going to happen.
She was so close that she was worried, right? She thought it might fall on her.
Yeah, she was across the street, nearly almost to the deli when it collapsed. The structure just collapsed midway and scared her. She started walking backwards, still meanwhile taking a photo.
We are back live now. What you're looking at is a drone that is being used by the FDNY to look inside that building to try and see if anybody is inside. That is the main focus, of course, trying to find survivors, people who might be trapped in the rubble underneath or trapped in that building, unable to get out. So many people out on the street who saw all this happen, and many of them have friends and relatives in that building. We haven't spoken to anybody yet who has talked to those friends and relatives yet, been able to reach them by phone, but we do know lots of people got out. People are safe. Still waiting to find out what the final result is. The FDNY is setting up for a news conference. We'll get a lot more information when that happens. Bill and Sandra.
Can you imagine, Jim, it was brought to our attention by several people, including former Commissioner Dan Nigro, that, you know what, this could have happened at 2:30 in the morning instead of 3:38 in the afternoon. And they were really lucky that it happened. I mean, if they had to be lucky at all, it was daylight when it happened, and they were able to get people out and scope the situation, Jim. And I think that's what is really happening down there. How do we get to anybody who's under that rubble, and how do we make sure people are safe who may be in that apartment and get them out of that apartment? And what do we do to start dismantling this? That's all at play in a single instance here, as you well know, Jim.
Yeah, and Bill, you look inside what's left of that building, and what you can see is you see people heading over to the scene right now. Those are for people from the mayor's office heading over to that scene right now. One of the things that you see when you look in that building is that those are living spaces. People live in those buildings, right? Until 3:30 this afternoon, those were homes, active living areas, and now they're just gone. And that's how quickly it can